Greetings and welcome to the Ngoma Zethu podcast. This is a special edition podcast because the subject that I want to try to share or discuss uh, in this episode is not unique to one race or one group of people. It's a problem, it's a very universal problem. And today we'll be talking about ism and schism. The isms that we hear about certain words all the time. You hear about socialism, you hear about communism, you hear about capitalism, you hear about racism, you talk about tribalism, fascism, exceptionalism, all these things, the ism and schism. And then that split, that strong, opposing view, among people, the schism. And it's very important that in the beginning I say that uh, sometimes when you're sitting and listening to a conversation by well-educated people, so educated in a sense that they went to a building, formally trained, all right. So that means they have some credibility that they walk with when they walk through the door. That I went to this, and that, or I did this in school. I studied that, and that, and here's the proof. Here's the evidence. When issues are discussed among people like that, in that kind of a setting, the viewer, somebody who's listening to that, they pretty much come in most of the time with the assumption that that person knows what they completely know what they're talking about. Okay, and the reason why I chose ism and schism as this special edition of the Ngoma Zethu podcast is that uh, several months ago, sometime last year, I was watching like a late night talk show on like cable news. Uh, that show has like political, social commentary, and there's a panel, maybe two or three people that discuss these issues. And the host or the program uh, was talking something about the way things are in America today. That is extremism on both sides. So be, I guess, the white right wing supremacy, and then on the left side, where there'll be some kind of very extreme views. That's not what I think. I don't think it that way, but that's what was being presented. More like Antifa or some extreme liberal group, whatever it is. But that's what they were discussing. And while the host is very opinionated, and he has read, but certain issues are beyond him because he's not knowledgeable on certain issues. It might be, if let's say you went to an American school and you studied history, like you majored in history, it doesn't mean that you know a lot about world history. Now, if you study history in America, most of the time you're studying history from the American perspective. So if you're studying history, European history, or its connection to America, whether it's like real communism, socialism, you're studying about Karl Marx, or you read something about all the communist leaders, and then he was trying to say that communism is bad or is evil. And he was saying it in a context that the leftists in this country that are trying to flirt with the idea of communism or socialism, which I totally agree that it's not, America is not structured like that. Even on the left side, there might be few people, but it's not structured in a sense whereby people flirt with like having uh, uh, the communist idea as as an identity. Now you have there's always been communist in most parts of the world, including South Africa where I grew up. But he was trying to talk about how capitalism is a better system, and then his contrast was that look at communism. It has killed a lot of people. Now killed a lot of people not through hunger, but more like it's a violent they're violent. The communists are violent. And when I listened to that, I was completely. I said, I thought I was kind of listening to an intellectual conversation, like a sane conversation. All of a sudden, I was like, nah, I might as well listen to the guys on the corner, at the liquor store, because doesn't make sense. Because as somebody who's like pro-capitalism, your contrast between capitalism and communism should be based on the economic benefits. That's all what it is. That in a capitalist society, people are more creative because they want to make as much money as possible. So they'll get more products. They create more products so they can make money. They can get rich. But the contrast shouldn't be based on violence. That communism is violent because as a white person, the host is a white person. So in his idea, he's looking at communists from the wide perspective that is over in Europe. So most of the atrocities that the communists have perpetrated are in Europe against other white people. But then he forgets that capitalism has killed more people than communism. It just happens that the victims of capitalism are black, brown, indigenous people. So maybe in his mind, as long as which is like really most of the time, the dominant culture, that if the victims are black, then you know what, maybe their tears are not that wet, or they don't feel no pain, or maybe we can disregard that. So he was talking about how communism has killed a lot of people, and I said, what about the genocides of Native Americans, of the Aboriginals, of the African enslaved Africans? I mean, you can go on and on. What the capitalists have done in the name of like making money in this idea, and I was completely shocked that this is the guy that I was supposed to take serious. But always, even those when I was carrying this conversation with people back in Johannesburg and Pretoria, it has never been about who was, or communism is more violent or he has perpetrated more violence. And that has always come, whenever I've heard that, it has always come from like westernized Anglo-Saxon white people when they try to contrast communism and capitalism. There's always this tendency, the false narrative about making communism more violent than capitalism. It's not. Capitalism is violent, even more violent. For black people, communism has never been violent to them. If you go to Africa, most countries that were communist countries at some point, when they got independence. Now, this is why I say that being a history major in America doesn't make you an expert on world history. You don't know because the education system here is very limited. It's very insular. Like one of the most famous African writers, Wallace Soyinka, said that it has its own good points, but it's very insular. Whether it's like news, everything is very insular. It's contained. So the greatest information that you have will always be contained to that environment. So even the people that I was talking about that I had like real debates with about just like ideologies, some kind of the fundamentals of life, what systems, what does work better. We have never gone into a space like that stupid space where you can equate like communism, or you can say that communism is more violent than capitalism, when the debate or the contrast will be about which one produces more goods, or which one gives people more, I guess, opportunities, employment, or something like that. I believe in human beings trying as hard as possible, as much as possible, in learning what we call the fundamentals of everything that impacts their life. Everything. Have like really basic understanding. I'm not a sports fan, but I have like base knowledge of how the sports franchises work. Not a whole lot of knowledge, but the base. Now, if I wanted to get more information, I'll ask somebody who knows more about it. Okay, what does that work and all that? But you have people in this country that speak on issues that they don't know because they studied some history somewhere at the school and think that they know like the whole entire history, and try to equate communism with violence, when in actual fact capitalism has committed more atrocities. If you look at the history of the world today, if you look at the contemporary history today, where the capitalists occupy space from if you look at the Caribbean, that's that's a capitalist entity. If you look at Latin America, that's a capitalist entity, even though there's places like Cuba where they've had communism, but they started as capitalist adventures where the native people there were slaughtered. And then the Africans were brought in here, and then they were dehumanized. Some of them died along the way. So if you talk about numbers, I don't know numbers. If you had to compare those that want to do the comparison about the numbers, how many people have fell victim to communism, violent wise, and capitalism, there's no doubt that capitalism will have greater casualties. The only problem is that the casualties are indigenous people. So in the eyes of certain group of white people, it doesn't. Yeah, it's yeah, because they don't feel it. They don't see life. Their whole outlook on life is not like that. It's only greater in number if, let's say, there's white victims. Just to give you an example, when you meet somebody who's not well educated, in a sense of how they're going to express themselves, and so that they're clear, you go to an event. And now I'm talking about this like in African terms. The people that are not like rare, they're just basic people. So they express themselves on a base level. And if the event, somebody asked me how many people were there, so if I'm just giving an example, I've heard that I've heard this with my own ears. So somebody, oh, there was a lot of people there, you know. There were like about maybe 100, like 100 people and maybe 5 whites. So you can see that it's not that they don't consider white people, but they just don't know how to express these things in proper context. That yes, there was quite a lot of people. I saw some Caucasians, some white people, there few, something like that. But he's using that word. There's like about maybe 100 people and maybe a few whites, because the whites have, in most societies, have established all the former plantation. The white colonial settler society established themselves as like not really part of the humans that were there. So it's like really acceptable for this person to say that he saw 100 people and few whites, but the whites are the one that created this situation where they're whites only, and then it's okay, we're people, Abantu, human beings, and then but white people are human beings too. But because that's how things are being completely confused, and this is happening even like with people that are supposed to be offering intellectual like real guidance. Unless if you're gonna call yourself like real talk show that brings in experts, make sure that you're clear about what you're talking about. You're really clear what you're talking about. Do not try to confuse uh, your contrast about systems. Should be solely based on what those systems are all about. What are they? What's the ideology? That communism is about like real ownership, like real collective ownership and state ownership, and then it intervenes and all that. And then capitalism is like real private entity. Do what you want. We have a few regulations here and there, and capitalism has brought in more maybe benefits to the world. Whether it's like medicine, that can be a discussion that can be taken serious.